Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling the power of focus.
Yeah, it's something we hear about all the time, but the sources we're looking at today really get into the nitty-gritty of why focus is so crucial.
Right, and not just like the work hard kind of message. These sources actually dig into how focused effort is. Well, it's more important than just putting in a ton of hours.
Exactly. One source had this really interesting point about how, uh, well, think about it this way. In school, you could just show up every day and kind of go through the motions. But to really ace a test, you got to study, right?
Makes sense. You have to focus on the material, not just be present.
Totally. But at work, the test, so to speak, isn't always so clear-cut.
So how do we know what to focus on, especially when we're juggling a million things at once?
Well, one of the sources had this really fascinating anecdote about, it was about a young girl in a competition.
Oh, tell me more. What kind of competition are we talking about?
So there's this girl, and she's up against an opponent, and they're both given these buckets of pebbles, right?
Okay, buckets of pebbles, where is this going?
The task is to move all the pebbles from one bucket to the other. Simple as that.
Sounds pretty straightforward, so where does focus come into play?
Well, the girl, she just zeroes in on the task, doesn't overthink it, just picks up one pebble at a time and moves it to the other bucket.
Okay, I can see that taking some serious focus. What about the opponent? Did he have a different strategy?
He did, and that's where things get interesting. He starts looking around trying to find tools, like maybe a scoop or something, to speed up the process.
Ah, trying to be efficient.
Exactly. But in all that, he loses sight of the actual task, gets so caught up in finding a shortcut that he actually falls behind.
That's a great example of how overthinking can sometimes backfire. So the girl's unwavering focus on the task at hand was the key to her success.
Absolutely. The source emphasizes this as the first principle of effective focus, defining the task clearly.
So before we even start thinking about eliminating distractions and all that, we need to make sure we're crystal clear on what we're actually supposed to be doing.
Exactly. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often people get sidetracked because they haven't really defined the task clearly. They jump into action without a clear plan.
And in the workplace, I imagine that can lead to, well, a lot of wasted time and effort, right? Working hard on things that maybe don't actually matter.
Oh, absolutely. You might be going above and beyond, but if it's not aligned with what your boss actually needs...
It's not going to move the needle.
Exactly.
So how do we avoid that trap? I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of tasks and to-dos. How do we make sure we're focusing on the right things?
Well, that's where the source's next principle comes in. It's all about minimizing those distractions.
Ooh, minimizing distractions. That's a tough one, especially in today's world. It feels like we're constantly bombarded with information and notifications.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But the source suggests something called time boxing. Have you heard of that?
Time boxing. Yeah, I think so, but refresh my memory.
Basically, you block off specific chunks of time for specific tasks, and during that time, you ruthlessly eliminate anything that could distract you.
So no checking emails every 5 minutes, no getting sucked into the social media black hole.
Right. It's about creating those focused bursts of productivity where you can really get things done.
It sounds great in theory, but I gotta admit, I'm a bit of a multitasker by nature. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm at my most creative when I'm bouncing between different ideas.
And that's totally fine. The source doesn't suggest you have to time box everything you do.
Oh, good, because that sounds exhausting.
Right. It's more about being strategic. Identify those tasks that require your absolute focus, the ones that really move the needle, and then time box those.
So for those crucial tasks, we build a little focus fortress around them, so to speak. I like that.
Exactly. And the source even suggests, identifying your personal distraction triggers and then creating strategies to minimize them.
Okay, so what kinds of things are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Well, it really depends on the person, right? For some people, it might be that constant urge to check their phone.
Oh, guilty's charged.
So maybe you put your phone in another room or use an app to block certain notifications during your focus time.
Yeah, I've tried that before and it actually works. It's like a breath of fresh air for my brain. What about other kinds of distractions? Like, what if it's not my phone, but my own thoughts that are derailing my focus?
Yeah, that's a common one too. That's where mindfulness techniques can be really helpful.
Mindfulness. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Basically, it's about training your mind to stay present, to notice those distracting thoughts without getting carried away by them.
So it's like acknowledging those thoughts and then gently redirecting our attention back to the task at hand.
Exactly. The source actually recommends incorporating short mindfulness exercises into your day. Even just a few minutes of focused breathing can make a huge difference.
Interesting. So we've got defining the task, minimizing distractions, anything else we need to keep in mind when it comes to cultivating that laser-sharp focus.
Well, remember the girl with the pebbles. She never lost sight of her goal. And that's the source's third principle. staying goal-oriented.
Ah, yes. She didn't get bogged down in the how, I was just focused on the what.
Precisely. But so often we get caught up in the challenges, the obstacles.
And we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right. It's like we become so fixated on the problems that we forget what we're actually trying to achieve.
I can definitely relate to that. So how do we avoid falling into that track? How do we stay focused on the goal even when things get tough?
Well, one thing the source suggests is to break those big, overwhelming tasks down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Ah, the classic divide and conquer strategy.
Exactly. Instead of getting intimidated by the whole mountain, you just focus on climbing the next hill. And each step you take, it brings you closer to the summit.
I like that. It's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right. And the source also emphasizes the importance of celebrating those small wins along the way.
That's so important. It's easy to get so focused on the end goal that we forget to acknowledge the progress we're making.
Absolutely. Those little victories, they can really boost your motivation and help you stay on track.
Okay, I'm totally on board with that. But let's be real. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, life throws us curveballs. Things get hectic, unexpected challenges pop up, and it's easy to feel completely overwhelmed.
It happens to all of us. The key is to remember that those overwhelming moments, they're actually opportunities to practice your focus skills.
Okay, explain that one to me. How are those stressful, chaotic times opportunities to practice focus?
Well, think about it. When you're feeling overwhelmed, it's easy to get scattered, to jump from one thing to another without really accomplishing anything.
Oh yeah, I've been there. It's like my brain goes into overdrive, but I'm not actually making any real progress.
Right. But that's where focus comes in. Instead of letting those challenges derail you, you use them as an opportunity to double down on your focus skills.
So it's like turning those challenges into a training ground for our focus muscles.
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing those obstacles as roadblocks, you view them as stepping stones on your path to success.
I love that. It's about taking control of the situation even when it feels like everything's spinning out of control. But how do we actually do that? I mean, it's easy to say stay focused, but when you're in the thick of it, it's a whole different ballgame.
True, but remember those practical tips we talked about earlier. Define the task, minimize distractions, stay goal-oriented. Those principles are even more crucial when you're feeling overwhelmed.
So it's like those principles become our anchor in the storm.
Exactly. And if a task feels too big or too daunting, break it down into smaller steps. Celebrate those small wins, and remember that the challenges are part of the journey, not the destination.
This makes me rethink my whole approach to challenges. It's not about avoiding them. It's about using them as opportunities to strengthen our focus and resilience.
Now you're getting it. It's all about that mindset shift.
Okay, so we talked about time boxing earlier as a way to minimize distractions, but how does that fit into this bigger picture of staying focused, especially when things get tough?
Time boxing can be a lifesaver when you're feeling overwhelmed. It creates those dedicated blocks of time where you can really zone in and get things done.
Right. It's like building those focus fortresses we talked about. But let's get practical. How do we actually implement time boxing effectively? Any tips or tricks?
Well, first, choose a system that works for you. Some people prefer digital calendars, others like good old-fashioned planners. It really doesn't matter as long as it helps you visualize your time.
So whether it's an app or a sticky note on my desk, the key is to actually schedule those blocks of time for specific tasks.
Yes, and be specific. Don't just write down work on project. Actually define what you'll be doing during that time. For example, write introduction for project report or research competitor analysis.
Okay, that makes sense. And then once those time blocks are scheduled, we need to protect them fiercely, right?
Absolutely. No multitasking, no distractions, just pure focused work.
So if I'm time boxing an hour to write, that means no email, no social media, no checking the news.
You got it. During that hour, your only job is to write.
Sounds almost blissful. I can already feel my anxiety levels decreasing just thinking about it. But I gotta ask, what about those unexpected interruptions? You know, the fire drills of life that always seem to pop up at the worst possible moment.
Well, the source acknowledges that life rarely goes according to plan.
Yeah, tell me about it.
That's why it's important to build some buffer time into your schedule.
Okay, so we're not talking about being rigid. It's about having a flexible framework.
Exactly. Things will come up, so plan for the unexpected. If something urgent pops up during your time-boxed hour, you can adjust your schedule knowing that you have dedicated time blocks for other tasks later in the day.
This whole conversation is making me realize that focus isn't just about working harder or longer. It's about working smarter.
That's a great way to put it. It's about being intentional with your time and energy, and creating systems and strategies that support your focus goals.
And the best part is, it's a skill we can all develop.
Absolutely. Like any muscle, the more you exercise your focus, the stronger it becomes.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new toolkit for boosting my focus.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making those small, consistent changes that add up over time.
So true. Small steps, big results. Okay, before we wrap things up, I'm curious, are there any other techniques or strategies that the source suggests for strengthening our focus?
Well, one thing the source touches on is mindfulness meditation. Have you ever tried that?
I have, yeah. A little bit, on and off. To be honest, I struggle with making it a regular thing.
It's definitely a practice, not a quick fix. But even a few minutes here and there can make a difference.
So how do we actually, make it stick? Any tips from the source?
Well, they recommend starting small, even just 5 minutes a day, and then gradually increase as you get more comfortable.
Okay, that sounds doable. I've heard there are apps that can help too, right?
Yeah, there are tons they can guide you through different types of meditation. Might be worth checking out.
Definitely. It's like if it's on my phone, maybe I'll actually do it. So we've covered a lot today. Defining the task, minimizing distractions, staying goal-oriented, time boxing, mindfulness. Anything else we should touch on before we wrap up this deep dive into focus?
Oh, one more thing. The source talks about the importance of creating a focus-friendly environment.
So it's not just about our internal state of mind, it's about our external surroundings too.
Right. Think about where you do your most important work. Is it cluttered? Chaotic? Or is it a space that promotes calm and concentration?
Okay, I'm seeing a connection here. My desk is definitely more on the cluttered side. Maybe that's part of the problem.
It's worth considering. Even small changes, like adding a plant or some natural light, can make a big difference. The source mentions some studies that show how those elements can actually boost focus.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe a little office makeover is in order. All right, so we've got our internal strategies and we can optimize our environment. Anything else?
Well, remember all that stuff about distractions. It's not just the physical stuff either.
You're talking about the digital world, right?
Exactly. The source has some great advice for taming those digital distractions. Being mindful of social media use. Setting limits on certain apps.
That's huge. It's so easy to get sucked into that endless scroll.
Totally. So it's about setting boundaries, creating a healthier relationship with technology.
This has been such a fascinating and practical deep dive into the power of focus.
I agree. It's been a great conversation.
And I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about and, more importantly, a lot of actionable steps they can take to sharpen their own focus. So as we wrap up, dear listeners, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of your biggest distractions? And what's one thing you can commit to doing today to minimize those distractions and boost your focus? Until next time, keep diving deep.